Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, and we've got our balanced data slate. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind you to make sure to like and subscribe for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team, Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and warcry content as well. So here's our long-awaited Warhammer 40,000 balanced data slate. Find out what changes are in store for your favorite army. And it is April 14th, 2022. Let's take a look at the article real quick, and then we will jump right into it. As we saw in our recent MetaWatch article, breaking down the top-level tournament games played at Adepticon, last month the Harlequins tap danced their way across the tables. The Warhammer studio were keeping a close eye, and the latest balanced data slate introduced a few measures to soften the damage dealt by the laughing Aeldari. That's not all this edition of the data slate, however, and there are several changes that will alter the balance of power in Warhammer 40,000. The balanced data slate is a regular update from the Warhammer 40,000 rules team that ensures that your games are fun and fair and exciting as new codexes, campaign books, and more make their presence felt in the battlefield. It keeps the game enjoyable for everyone, elevating factions that need more of an edge and reining in those that are currently riding a little too high. It's one free download that gives you everything you need to know. Richard Butler from the Warhammer studio has some information for us on the latest update. 2022 has been an eventful year so far for the metagame balance in the Warhammer 40,000. We are making a range of tweaks at both the universal rules and codex rules to rein in some of the overpowering factions, to bring fresh excitement to the underperforming factions. We have adjusted how a couple of generic mechanics work, the indirect fire rule and variations of the Bodyguard mechanic. The main goal behind these changes is for units with rules to still feel cool and immersive, but also give the opposing player more ways to interact with them. In addition, these changes have all introduced new generic rule, Armour of Contempt. Applying to certain faction keywords, the rule is intended to reduce the lethality of the game for a whole swathe of factions, which have traditionally relied on their armor to help them survive the punishing battlefields of Warhammer 40,000, and which are currently finding the ubiquitous of high AP weaponry a little bit much. At a faction level, the Tau Empire, Adeptus Custodes, and Harlequins have been most recently overperforming, so we've made a few tweaks to reduce the oppressiveness of these factions while retaining the excitement of their playstyles, and not invalidating any player's collection of miniatures. At the end of the scale, we have given some buffs to factions such as Astra Militarum, Death Guard, and Adeptus Sororitas. There are some significant changes in the data slate. While this impacts of any of the changes may be fairly minor, when together, these are sure to shake up state of play in the Warhammer 40,000, and exciting to see the impact of the data slate in the wild. So the article goes on. We will continue to read it, and then we'll go to the balanced data slate. Let's unpack some of these details. Warhammer 40,000 has become more lethal over time, leaving power-armored factions slightly behind the performance curve. Enter Armour of Contempt, a new rule which reduces by 1 the armor penetration of attacks that target Adeptus Astartes, Sanctic Astartes, Heretic Astartes, and Adeptus Sororitas models. With a handful of caveats, this should bulk out Space Marines and Battle Sisters just enough to keep them in the fight. The second significant change comes to indirect fire weapons, which ability to target units in cover has left them hard to counter. These have been tweaked to anything shooting at a unit that it cannot see has a ballistic skill reduced by 1, while the targeting unit earns a bonus to their saving throw. Importantly, Astra Militarum weapons with this rule are not affected by the change, lucky as they love their big guns. Bodyguard abilities are also seeing changes to iron out some of the interactions. Every instance of the rule, and many exist, will change its final line from enemy models cannot target that model unit with ranged attacks to that character unit can use the Lookout Sir rule, even if the unit contains fewer than 3 models. This means bodyguard units will continue to function, but you will need to think carefully about how to position your models to protect your vulnerable characters. The top performing armies all received tweaks. Harlequins have Mirror Architect and Favor of Segarath adjusted, needing more care to use due to their powerful nature. Meanwhile, Starweavers and Voidweavers see an increase in points, but retain their lethality and utility. Adeptus Custodes receive changes so that Objective Secured rule only applies to troops, part of the shield host best suited for capturing objectives. This means that powerhouse picks like Trajan Valorous or Alaris Terminators will be freed up to dish out the hurt wherever they're needed. Also, a handful of their most powerful stratagems become one use only, with some changing to only affect core, so you'll need to think carefully about how to use these game-changing abilities. Finally, Monka has been tweaked to remove AP bonus at the Tau Empire broadside. For the Tau Empire, broadside battlesuits have had core removed, and specifically charge blunting rules have stopped stacking, so Tau remain a premier shooting faction, but you'll need to work a little bit harder to protect your gun knights from vicious melee assailants. As well as the above headline items, other factions see a host of impactful changes. The Astro Militarum gain new detachment abilities called Hammer of the Emperor, under which armies drawn from one regiment automatically wound targets on unmodified hit rolls of 6s, while the infantry go up in price. Upgrades are now all free. Mass platoons are backed. The Sisters of Battle now also get buffs to Miracle Dice, ensuring that their faith to the Emperor is not found wanting to in comparison to the Asuryani Strands of Fate. Neither Chaos nor Imperial Knights have updates in this edition of the dataslate. They are about to tear up the battlefields of 41st Millennia with new codexes and some of the biggest guns and melee weapons you'll ever seen. And the Warhammer Studio wants to see how they perform before making any changes, and those changes they saw in the previous balanced dataslate have been absorbed into the new codexes. All that's left is for you to take your tabletop using these changes and start playing games. Make sure you subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual balanced dataslate now. Alright, so here we have the balanced dataslate Q2 2022 Universal Match Play Rules. Let's take a look. Armor of Contempt. Each time an attack is allocated to an Adeptus Astartes, Sanctus Astartes, Heretic Astartes, or Adeptus Sororitas model, worsen the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. This rule does not apply to any of the following: models equipped with a Storm Shield, a Relic Shield, or a Combat Shield, or a relic that replaces one of these. Models with either the Sacrosanct Shield or Force Shield ability, Celestial Sacrosants or Nemesis Dread Knight units. Models that are under the effects of any other rule that worsens reduction of the armor penetration characteristic of the attack. Okay, interesting. So that's every... Wow, that's pretty strong. So they give everything like crazy AP, and then they're going to come back and remove 1 AP when you're targeting Space Marines, Chaos, Sororitas, and what is Sanctus Astartes? Is that Admech? No. Oh, it's Grey Knights. Alright, so that's interesting. It just takes away 1 AP against all armor. The way it was worded in the article, it sounded like vehicles, but it's just all armor AP is -1, or 1 less. Aircraft. When mustering your force for match play game, it cannot include more than 1 aircraft model if you're playing a combat patrol or incursion size game, more than 2 aircraft if you're playing a strike force size game, or more than 3 aircraft if you're playing an onslaught size game. So I think they just took away another aircraft. I thought before it was 1 for combat patrol, 2 for incursion, and 3 for strike force. So I'm pretty sure they just made it even one less aircraft. So I think aircraft just got even worse. Indirect fire weapons. An indirect fire weapon is one that can target units that are not visible to the bearer. Mortars, smart missile systems, and impaler cannons. If such a weapon targets a unit that is not visible, then each time an attack is made with that weapon against that target this phase, worsen the ballistic skill characteristic of the attack by 1 and add 1 to any armor saving throw made against that attack. So if you shoot and you can't see them, with the firing unit, you're -1 to hit, and their saving throw is +1. So that's probably, that's exactly what we were saying needed for indirect fire. So that's actually pretty good. I like that. Attacks made with indirect fire weapons by Astro Militarum models are not affected by any of the indirect fire weapon rules presented above. So that's good for Astra Militarum. They obviously don't need any more nerfs. The truth is, that probably means that the Astra Militarum Codex is not coming anytime soon, because they specifically mentioned knights and said this doesn't apply to knights because the codexes are coming. So we know Astra Militarum, demons, and Chaos Marines or Heretics Astartes still haven't gotten their codex. So it's probably going to be a while before those come out, at least till next quarter. So Bodyguard abilities, change the end of all Bodyguard abilities from enemy model units cannot target the character unit with ranged attacks. 2. That character unit can use the Lookout Sir rule even if the unit contains fewer than 3 models. Okay, so now the character can be targeted, but still applies to the Lookout Sir rule. So essentially what happens now is the Bodyguard rule that all these characters already got anyway now applies to units that have the Bodyguard rule but have less than 3 models in them. So if you're the closest to the character, you can still shoot them. And then the other ones are basically if it was like a vehicle, a unit with 3 or more models, or a monster. So it's taking away a lot of the limitations that the Bodyguard didn't have, or adding limitations back in, I should say. If a unit's Bodyguard ability only affects a specific type of character, the updated version of the Bodyguard ability only applies to the type of character. Crypto Thralls only apply to Cryptek units, so now the ability only applies to Cryptek units. The following are Bodyguard abilities. Bodyguard Cold-Blooded, Bodyguard Guardian Organism, Guardian Protocols, Honor Guard, Operated Artillery, Protectors, Swarm Protectors, Varguard Duty, Watchman. This rule also applies to the following stratagems that confer a Bodyguard ability to a unit: Implacable Guardians, Seer Council, Shield of Honor. This rule only affects the first bullet point of the Locust Bodyguard ability. Hive Tyrants within range of Guardian Organism's ability gain the benefits of Lookout Sir, even though they are character units. The wound characteristic greater than 9. So again, the ways around the Bodyguard rule are basically now, if you have a Bodyguard unit next to it, so let's say a bunch of Tau Crisis suits, if you just get to where the Crisis suit you want to shoot at the character is the closest model to you, you can shoot it and they can't use the Bodyguard rule. There's also a bunch of weapons that ignore the Bodyguard rule or Lookout Sir rule. So sniper weapons and stuff like that. And then on top of that, it's still if there's a monster, it's still if there's a vehicle, and now it's if there is a unit with the Bodyguard rule, regardless of if it's 3 models or a regular unit with 3 models or more, within range. So I think that's probably fair enough. I think that's probably what they needed to do, at least for now. So we've seen a couple like pretty substantial, nerfs to Tau at this point. Adeptus Sororitas changed the first bullet point in the Gaining Miracle Dice section of the Acts of Faith to read, at the start of each turn, gain 1 Miracle Dice. Change the second bullet point in the Stoic Endurance Order of the Valorous Heart conviction to read, each time an attack is made against a unit with this conviction, the attack's wound roll cannot be rerolled. So Valorous Heart before had the -1 to your AP. Obviously now everybody has that, so now the attack roll the wound roll can't be rerolled, and then gaining an extra Miracle Dice at the beginning of every turn is obviously pretty good. So between that and the other buffs to Sisters, that's pretty good. Add the following to the detachment abilities of an Astra Militarum detachment. Hammer of the Emperor. If every regiment unit in your army is drawn from the same regiment, then each time a regiment model from your army makes a ranged attack, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target. Note that units listed as advisors and auxilia do not prevent other Astra Militarum units from your army from gaining this rule, but advisors and auxilia units never benefit from the rule. Change the same characteristic of Astra Militarum Le Mans Rust models to 2+, so that's pretty big, obviously 2 up save. When using the tank order ability of regiment tank commander models, you can select 1 friendly regiment vehicle unit, excluding Titanic units within 6 inches of that regiment tank commander model, instead of selecting regiment Le Mans Rust unit. So you can pick anything but a Titanic vehicle now, not just a Leman Russ. Each time a regiment unit with the Voice of Command ability issues one of the following orders to a regiment infantry unit, the same order can be issued to 1 more other friendly regiment infantry unit excluding officer units that are within 6 inches of the unit that the order was originally issued to. Take aim, first rank fire, second rank fire, bring it down, forward for the Emperor, and get back in the fight and fix bayonets. So you basically can give it to 2 units now instead of just 1. Change the points cost for infantry squad units as follows. Note that the cost of all the units' war gear options is reduced to 0. Wow. So infantry squad unit size 10, unit cost 60. So they basically just got all their equipment for free. All their war gear options, I should say, for free. And the unit cost is down to 60. Were they 7 points before? So they're 10 points cheaper. That's interesting. Definitely guard getting some nice stuff to hold them over, obviously. Adeptus Custodes changed the 3rd bullet point of the detachment abilities to Adeptus Custodes detachments to read troop units, and Adeptus Custodes detachments gain the objective secured ability. So it's only troops now have objective secured. That's probably how it should be. So anything from the troops, which is your guard, obviously, objective secured now. Everything that's not a troops, lost it. Add the following to the esteemed amalgam Emperor's Auspice and Martial Discretion stratagems. You can only use this stratagem once. So 3 of their big stratagems just went down to 1 use only. Change the Adeptus Custodes keyword in all instances on the Arcane, Genetic, Alchemy, and Emperor's Auspice stratagems to read Adeptus Custodes Infantry. So that's a pretty big deal. So now they only apply to infantry. You can no longer use them on bikes or like dreadnoughts, for instance. Adeptus Mechanicus, remove the core keywords from keyword section of the following datasheets. Ironstrand Ballistari and Sirgonian Dragoons. Okay, so Ballistari and Dragoons just lost core. That makes sense. That was too powerful before. Change the first bullet point of the Solar Blessing, Lucius Dogma to read. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model with this dogma, unless the model is receiving the benefits of light cover, add 1 to the armor saving throw made against the attack. Add the following to the Clandestine Infiltration stratagem. You can only use this stratagem twice. Add the following to the Acquisition of Any Cost stratagem. You can only use this stratagem once. Change the last sentence of the Galvanic Volley Fire stratagem to until the end of the phase, galvanic rifles models in that unit are equipped with have a type characteristic of heavy 3. Change the CP cost of the Enriched Rounds stratagem to 1 command point / 2 command points and add the following to the end of the stratagem. If that unit contains 11 or more models, the stratagem costs 2 command points. Otherwise, it costs 1. In addition, change the end of the last sentence of the stratagem to read, an unmodified successful hit roll of 5+ automatically wounds the target. So some command point changes and some limits on some stratagems. Space Marines. Change the 2nd bullet point of the Forged in Battle Salamanders chapter tactic to read, each time an attack is made against this unit with this tactic, the attack's wound roll cannot be rerolled. So again, it was already -1 AP, now it goes to the reroll. So it's the same thing we saw in the Adeptus Sororitas. Chaos Space Marines. Change the Death to the False Emperor ability to read, each time a model with this ability takes a melee attack, a hit roll of 6+ scores 1 additional hit. So it was a unmodified hit roll of 6. Now it's a hit roll of 6+. So pluses to hit, score additional hits, and can be modified now, if I'm not mistaken. Add the following bullet point to detachment abilities of the Death Guard detachment. Blightlord Terminators and Death Shroud Terminator units in the Death Guard detachment gain the objective secured ability. So that's pretty cool. So Terminators now for a Death Guard have objective secured. They did not roll back the points increases though, which is strange. Remove the core keyword from the keyword section of the following datasheets. Talos and Kronos. Okay, so Talos and Kronos lost core. Change the 2nd bullet point of the Agile Hunter's Obsession to read, if a unit with this obsession with the Combat Drugs ability has the Hypex ability, add 3 inches to the unit's move characteristic instead of 2. Change the first sentence of the Dark Technomancer's Obsession to read, each time a unit with this obsession is selected to shoot, you can choose enhance any or all of your ranged weapons models that the units are equipped with. Liquefire guns and twin liquefire guns can never be enhanced. Change the Artist of the Flesh obsession to read, each time an attack is allocated to a model with this obsession, excluding vehicle models, unless the attack is strength characteristic of 8 or more, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack to a minimum of 1. Necrons. Add the core keyword to the keyword section of the following datasheets: Canoptic Archathrites, Imperial Armor, Canoptic Reanimator, Canoptic Race, Flayed Ones, Locust Destroyers, Locust Heavy Destroyers, Ophidian Destroyers, Scorpic Destroyers, and Triarch Praetorians. So that is huge. A bunch of Necrons units obviously have the core. We've seen that basically be like their kind of fix for Necrons previously. Orcs. When mustering an Orcs army, it cannot include more than one each of the following units: Boomdaka Snazwagon, Custom Boosta Blasta, Megatrek Scrapjets, Rocket Truck Squig Buggies, and Shock Drunk Dragstas. So, still really limiting the Orc Buggies. We did not see any rollbacks in the points, obviously. So, Harlequins, this is the one that everyone's been waiting for. Change the Mirror Architect Pivotal Role to read, in your command phase, select one friendly slittaz unit, then 9 inches of its model until the start of the next command phase. Each time an enemy unit is selected to shoot, when measuring the range to that model, to models in that slittaz unit, it's considered to be an additional 6 inches away. So now instead of everything gaining the additional 6 inches distance rule, you pick one thing in your command phase. That's much better. So you're going to be less likely to create that just bubble of -6 to your hit range. Change the Favor of Segarath Warlord trait to read, once per turn when you make a melee hit roll, a melee wound roll, or saving throw for this warlord. After making the roll, you can treat the result as an unmodified hit roll of 6. So this was the super combo on the Death Jester. Before, he had the exploding 6s on his gun. When you rolled a 6 to hit, he got an extra 3 hits. So you hit with the 1 and then 3 more, and he had 9 shots. So you could potentially get a ton of hits with this, and you could obviously force 1 automatically with this warlord trait. Now the warlord trait only works in melee hit, melee wound, or saving throws. So you can no longer have 1 exploding 6 automatically. So that warlord trait is basically useless on the Death Jester, because you're not going to be using him in melee. And I mean, the save could be okay, I guess, but it's not good. So he's basically useless at this point. Not useless, but he lost the good ability, basically, that made him awesome. Change the points cost of the Starweaver unit to Starweaver unit size 1, unit cost 95 points. So they were 80 points. They just went up 15 points. Yeah, they just went up 15 points. And then change the points cost for Void Weaver units to Void Weaver unit size 1 to 3, unit cost 130 points. Wow. So they were 90 points before, and the Starweavers were 80 points. So Starweavers went up 15 points, and Void Weavers went up 40 points. So if you have 9 Void Weavers in your army, that is 360 additional points. And if you were taking, say, 4 Starweavers, what did I just say? 360? Wow, that's crazy. That is a big blow. Yeah, so 360 plus another 60, so that's 420 points. You'll now have to trim out of your army, so it's impossible to field this list anymore. You basically have to, wow, that is a huge, huge hit to Harlequins. Now, obviously they were good, but they didn't give any time for the meta to really adjust. And then on top of that, that is a massive points increase. Going from 90 to 130 on a unit you're taking potentially 9 of, that is insane. So that is 360 extra points just for the Void Weavers. So now you're basically going to need to run, 360, that's crazy. So again, I'm not defending Harlequins. I'm not saying that they didn't need a nerf, but that is like super, super extreme. That is very extreme. Now again, I'm not saying that doesn't bring them in line with other vehicles, but look at some of the other vehicles you can get for 130 points now. Now if you're using light, they're still really good because only 50% of the time can you hit them unless you're within 12. Because that's like the light ability that makes them really good. And then their defensive ability is you can't re-roll the wound roll. I'm sorry, you can't re-roll the hit roll. And they're an extra -1 to hit. So anything that was going to hit before on 4s now goes to 5s because of the -1 to hit. Anything that was going to hit on 3s gets -1 and goes to 4s. So most things are going to be hitting them on 4s. And then on top of that, you can't re-roll. So it basically makes it so anything that shoots at them is only 50% as effective, which is definitely good. But they do only have, they have a 4-up invulnerable save, but no other save. So they're only going to save 50% of the hits. You do have your luck of the laughing dice rerolls. So obviously big hits you can affect with those rerolls. But going up from 90 to 130 points, that's a lot of points. That's pretty insane if you ask me. I think they went overboard on this. And then obviously in the recent Aeldari Codex update we saw, they turned Harlequin troops into actual core, which we don't see in this update. They should have just put it in this update too, even though they already did it in the Codex. It would have just been good to reiterate here. So troops now have core, but the Death Jester is not nearly as good. The Mirror Architect pivotal role, again, is not nearly as good because instead of affecting everything now, it's only affecting one unit. So let's say, for instance, you want to deep strike in with a unit and then flame a big, a unit of their bikes or whatever. Now they have to pick which unit ahead of time during their command phase, and then you can just deep strike and attack the different one. So they have to really worry about screening now, which previously they didn't, because you would drop in, you go to shoot your 12-inch weapons, you're -6 inches to your range. So now you're 9 inches away, but the range is only 6, so you can't hit them. So that was a big defensive hit to Harlequins. Again, not saying they didn't need it, but the defensive hit and then an offensive hit to the Death Jester, and then the transports going up 15 points apiece. So if you're taking on average like 4 transports, maybe 3, let's say most people are taking 4, I think, that's an extra 60 points. And then if you were taking 9 Void Weavers, that's an extra 360 points. So that is 420 points that army went up. So if you had a 2,000 point army with said units in it, it's now a 2,420 point army. So you have to remove 420 points from that army. So it's still possible. It's still possible to field 9 Void Weavers, but you're going to be hard pressed to fit much of anything else in there. So that's 900 plus another 270. So that's 1170 for your Void Weavers. And then assuming you have 3 troops minimum and you want them in transports, 1170, 12, 13, 14, 55. So 1,455 points. And then each of the characters is over 100 points. So that's like 1855. And then you could basically, you can't even get 3 troop at that point in time. So you really have to, this is going to really change the army. Because now you're almost not going to be able to field an army with everybody in a boat or all boats. Like you normally would have like 1 or 2 characters on foot and then 4 or more units of troop inside of transports, and then obviously your 9 weavers. That is not going to be viable anymore. So that is huge. Now, if you took away one of those Star Weavers, so say you have 2 units of troops in Star Weavers now, you could probably take 1 big unit of Harlequins and then put them in the webway for a command point. So you would basically have 1 big unit of Harlequins that can deep strike, 2 units in Star Weavers, all 4 of your characters, and then 3 threes of Void Weavers and still swing it. So there's still a viable way to take this army. It's going to cost you 1 command point now. They're not going to have quite the offensive or defensive capabilities just because of those little changes we saw to the pivotal role and to the Death Jester. But overall, the army is still going to be very durable. It's just going to take a little rework. Honestly, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think having, before we were seeing pretty much like 4 to 6 units of the troop taken in the army. Now you're going to see probably 3 or 4 units of the troop taken in the army. And now instead of seeing, 4 or 5 Star Weavers, you're probably going to see 2 Star Weavers with troops inside, and then 1 or 2 units of troops like in the webway, or something to that effect. So again, I don't think that that's like going to kill the army. It's going to make it tough to field the same army, but I still think that it'll be competitive. So I think I'll have to absorb it a little, play a couple test games, and then see exactly how it pans out. But I think they did okay on that. I don't think they went overboard. I don't think that, I mean, that's a lot of points increases, but I'm not saying it's not justified. So let's look at Tau. This is our last one. Change the second bullet point of the Montka ability to read each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack. The target's the closest eligible enemy unit within the range shown in the table below. Reroll wound rolls of 1. Okay, so they took away the AP on Montka, which it was way too good, obviously. It was way too good. Having the extra 1, 2, or 3... Or no, wait. Montka, was that the exploding? Yeah, that's crazy. So change the first bullet point of devastating counter-strike Farside Enclades to read each time a model with this tenet takes a ranged attack that targets units within 9 inches. The target is treated as having a marker-light token. Remove the core keyword from keyword section of the broadside battlesuit dataset. So that's huge. Obviously, broadsides were too easy to buff and got way too good with core, so that needed to go. We knew that was coming. Add the following to the repulsor impact field and photon grenade stratagem. The charge roll modifier incurred via the stratagem is not cumulative with other negative modifiers to unit charge roll. So from now on, it's only ever -2 to your charge. They can't stack a bunch of -2s to make it like an impossible charge or really hard charge. All right, so overall, what do we think of this? I think it's good. I think they did a good job, honestly. I like this balanced status light. It seems like it has everything we needed. The Harlequins got core. We needed that. We needed a nerf to the points. We needed some of those abilities to get nerfed a little bit too. We got that. That's everything we needed for Harlequins. They're still going to be good. They're still going to be fun. They're still going to be competitive, but not nearly as brutal. We saw the Bodyguard rules change. That's what Tau needed. We saw broadsides lose the core ability. That's definitely what needed to be done. We also saw some other nerfs as well to Tau. Indirect fire obviously is huge. So I think they did good with all that. Don't know that the aircraft needed a further nerf. Now I'm pretty sure before you were restricted to 3 aircraft. I could be wrong. Maybe that didn't get worse. But if it did, that's rough. We see basically Astra Militarum got a couple of nice little buffs. Sororitas got a nice little buff. All the Imperial factions, Sororitas, Marines, and Grey Knights all got a nice little buff to their armor. Custodes got a tiny little nerf, but nothing devastating. Didn't see anything change with Trajan, which is what people were kind of expecting. Mechanicus got a couple of nerfs, nothing too crazy. Chaos got slightly better. Death Guard got slightly better. Drukhari got slightly worse. Admech got slightly worse. Necrons, again, got core on like everything pretty much. And Orcs just stuck with that same buggy situation. So let me know what you think down below. I think overall they did pretty good here. I like the rules changes. I like the points changes. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. So that is our balanced data slate for Q2 of 2022. I am Warhammer Man. This is Warhammer Man Studios. If you enjoyed today's video and videos on Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and Warcry content, please make sure to like and subscribe. That being said, Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.